Welcome to Indus Special. I'm Ejaz Haider. How has the current Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf government fared on the foreign policy front? The decision 2 days ago that Prime Minister Imran Khan has cancelled his visit to Kuala Lumpur to attend the KL summit convened by Malaysian Prime Minister Dr. Mahathir Mohamad has begotten much criticism. Is the criticism justified? What treacherous waters is Pakistan negotiating at a time when the world is in a state of flux? The Greater Middle East is choppy even by its own standards, and US-China rivalry is impacting a large array of countries. To discuss this, we have with us Dr. Moeed Yusuf. Moeed chairs the strategic planning cell at the Prime Minister's office and is one of the most prominent scholars of Pakistan. We shall also be joined by Ambassador Munir Akram, Pakistan's permanent representative at the United Nations, and also Ambassador Zamir Akram will join us from Islamabad. But let's first begin with Moeed. And let me kick off with the obvious question here, Moeed. And that question is about Prime Minister's decision to not attend the KL summit. And that decision is being heavily criticized. What exactly happened when the PM was in Saudi Arabia? Were we asked by Riyadh to stay away?
Thanks, Ejaz. Thanks for having me on the program. Look, before I answer your specific question, let me take a step back and take a couple of minutes to explain to you the larger picture. Because I think the critique that you are talking about and pointing to, frankly, is a snapshot view of what has happened in the last week and the optics around it. What's the larger picture? You know, you and I have been sitting for months and years in TV programs debating this issue. I, as an analyst at the time, what was the concern? The concern was, Pakistan jumps into one camp against another camp. Pakistan doesn't think strategically, we take things tactically, day-to-day firefighting mode, right? We think security first. What are we doing now? We are changing the paradigm to look at Pakistan as an actor that can talk to the entire Muslim world in a friendly manner, negotiate, mediate where required, and be that leader that Pakistan's always talked about being. Not only in the Muslim world, quite frankly, we're moving away from this whole idea of a zero-sum game. With me or against me. If you're with one, you're against me. What are we telling the world on the US-China rift? China is a strategic partner, CPEC is non-negotiable, but we still want very good relations with the US. What are we telling the world about India? We are no longer telling the world that if you are talking to India, if you're investing in India, we don't want to speak to you. No, it's not a zero-sum equation. We understand that countries have relationships with India, countries who are very close to us like Saudi Arabia and UAE, but we are talking of a very strong, even stronger than before, bilateral relationship, while there may be other engagements with India. This is a very mature paradigm shift. What's the second pillar of this shift? Economic diplomacy. The Prime Minister, when he took over, I wasn't in the system of course, talked about economic diplomacy as the driving force. The Foreign Minister has said this on a number of occasions. What's the focus here? The focus is that every decision we make, including the KL summit, is going to be based on our economic requirements, necessities and opportunities. Why do you think we were talking to Malaysia and Turkey? Is Malaysia giving us F-16 planes? There's no real defense benefit there, so to say. It is because we have a weakness, we haven't opened up to ASEAN, we are looking at that economic factor and doing that. Now, let's come to your question, because you can say, well, then we should have gone to the KL summit. Look, the Prime Minister went to Saudi Arabia. Before that, the Foreign Minister went to Saudi Arabia, not to ask for assistance. Otherwise, you would have seen some statement, right? The Saudis have given you this extra or that extra, Pakistan asked for this or that. The question we were trying to answer was, if we go to Malaysia, will it create more divisions or make matters better for the Muslim world? And the Prime Minister's trip, and you asked me what happened in Saudi Arabia, the Prime Minister's trip was fundamentally about trying to patch the differences and remove the reservations of some countries about the KL summit. And the decision was, if those differences can be patched well enough in time for the summit, Pakistan will definitely attend as it had planned. But if not, then this may be a time when we need to pull back after taking Prime Minister Mahathir, President Erdogan and the Saudi leadership into confidence. And if that weren't true, you would have seen some negative statements coming out of either Malaysia or Saudi Arabia or Turkey. And we haven't seen that. Look at the Malaysian statement after the Prime Minister informed Prime Minister Mahathir that he won't be coming. It's a very mature, balanced, conciliatory statement, and that's the reason for it. So what happened in Saudi Arabia, the answer to that is a function of what we went for. And we went to ask Saudi Arabia, and we talked to Malaysia before and after to see if we can remove the differences that both have talked about openly about this summit. That's why the Prime Minister was there, and of course that didn't happen, and thus Pakistan decided to pull back without damaging relations with any of these countries or burning any bridges. That's the key point in our new paradigm that we need to appreciate.
Okay. So the next obvious question would be, if, as you say, we do not want to be seen in any camp and that we were a neutral party between what Malaysia wants to do and what the Saudi concerns are, could we have told Riyadh that while the PM will not go to the summit at this point, the FM should go to give a sense of balance?
Yes, I mean, of course. And you don't think these issues were discussed. Look, I mean, all of these considerations were on the table. You know, it's public. There's no sort of hidden secret here that Saudi Arabia did have reservations. They have said that they saw this as a parallel organization to OIC, and OIC is the real forum. The Malaysian Prime Minister has clarified that that's not the intent. That was certainly not the intent that Pakistan was going with. All of these issues were discussed internally, whether the Prime Minister should go, whether the Foreign Minister should go in his stead, and ultimately a decision was made that at this time, the best thing we can do is pull back and keep our ability to go to both countries and try and patch up differences and mediate if needed after the summit. And that's where I think the balance is at this moment. You can come back to me in a couple of months and I would accept that I'm wrong if you don't see any movement from Pakistan in trying to, continuing to try and patch up differences, not only between the countries in question, but around the Muslim world. And if you don't see any engagement between Saudi Arabia and, let's say, Malaysia or any other countries with tension, I think these efforts will continue. And the decision made by the leadership was that for us to be in that position and coming at this from a position of strength to help our brother countries, it may be best not to be represented at this summit. And that's essentially the decision. But trust me, all of these issues, all of these options were discussed, and a final decision was made only after that. Let me also add one other thing. I didn't mention this. I've seen a lot of reporting saying that the decision not to go was already made before the Prime Minister went to Saudi Arabia. I can categorically tell you, Ejaz, that is not true. That is absolutely not true. I know this for a fact. You can also ask me, and people have asked me, well, why did he go? The easiest thing to do at that time was for him not to go. And we could have just said, look, we've tried and we've decided not to go. But he went. It was a risky trip. It was a trip that he knew, and we knew that the optics won't be good if the Pakistani delegation doesn't go to KL after all. But he still decided to go because he wanted to give it a last shot to see if Pakistan can bring these countries together, remove the differences, and move on with the summit. So I actually think that was a very bold decision, but we had not decided at that time, and we did not know what the outcome would be from that trip. But the reason for the trip was to try and patch up differences.
So here's the thing. We are, as you have tried to explain, trying to shift from geopolitics to geoeconomics. We don't want to be seen as siding with one or the other camp. Give us the salient features of this policy shift.
Number one, think economics when you decide where to go, which alliance camp to be part of, which partnership to work on, and which ones become less important. Think economics. So you are ultimately diversifying your alliances based on your economic necessities and opportunities. Number two, if you're going to do this, you need to change your paradigm internally as well. the coordination between ministries, the coordination between the federal government and the provinces, the coordination between different arms of the state has to be different if our focus is economic diplomacy. And that doesn't mean that your security focus disappears. That doesn't mean that you lighten up on anything else. It just means that you coordinate better on your economic front. So you have the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, you have the Ministry of Commerce, you have tourism, you have culture. Economic diplomacy is a very broad canvas. The first thing we have to do is to define it. Then we have to come up with a framework of coordination which would seamlessly transfer our vision into good implementation. And then we have to create monitoring and measurement benchmarks, key performance indicators as we call them, to see what is working, what is not working, and then tweak it as needed. This is not going to happen overnight. This is a process that we are starting. We have started and it will continue. But the lens is what benefits Pakistan's economic security most, keeping in mind the constraints and the challenges of the security environment we exist in, and the non-negotiable fact that we have to be a secure state in terms of traditional security no matter what. That's essentially in a nutshell what it is. The toughest part is not the vision. The toughest part is implementing it, and that's where a lot more work has to be done, but it is underway. I myself am involved, but there are many other arms of the government that are working on this day in, day out to make it happen, because this is the vision that the Prime Minister has put out since day one of this government.
Finally, Moeed, before I let you go, what exactly is the role of the strategic cell headed by you? What's the mechanism in and through which you manage inter-agency cooperation?
Just this cell was set up to fill one void, which is that we didn't have in us civilian sphere an empowered body that could provide intellectually, evidence-based, intellectually managed input to the Prime Minister and the apex bodies like the National Security Committee that this cell is directly linked to. We've talked a lot about in this country think tanks and the culture not being there, and why does America and Britain, why do these countries have such vibrant think tanks and policy input mechanisms? Well, this is a humble attempt, I would say. And the idea is twofold. One, produce original analysis, not only on day-to-day issues, but on issues which are over the horizon, which are strategic in nature, which are long-term in nature, and gear the system up to deal with them proactively rather than reactively. And second, act as a channel between experts, the best minds in Pakistan, the best institutions, think tanks, university research centers, and the government and the decision makers. So in this role, I report to the Prime Minister precisely because this is an empowered structure that the Prime Minister and the team wants to get independent input from, which is based on evidence, which supplements what the institutions are doing. Does not replace anything, does not substitute anything, it cannot. It's a very small organization just trying to supplement all the good work and analysis that institutions already put out for the government and the leadership. So that's essentially the role here, and it's a start at this point, but my plea to everybody always is, we always talk about expertise and the need for expertise. Here is a formal opportunity for experts to step forward, give us structured policy advice that we can, take to the leadership and hopefully implement as and when possible.
Thank you, Moeed, for your insights. We now move to Ambassador Munir Akram, who joins us from New York. Thank you, sir, for your time. We are discussing Pakistan's foreign policy challenges. You are representing Pakistan at the world body. Kashmir and India are obvious challenges, as are our relations with the US and the Muslim bloc. Let's begin in that order, starting with Kashmir and India. What exactly is the challenge here, sir?
There are, I think, three challenges that we have to address. Firstly is the massive oppression that India has imposed in occupied Kashmir, and the danger of violations of human rights and a possible massacre happening if and when the Kashmiris resist. Indian occupation and the new measures that have been imposed in occupied Kashmir. The second danger is the compromise of Kashmiri self-determination through various means, through the measures that India has adopted, and the equation of Kashmiri resistance with terrorism. This obviously is an effort that has to be frustrated, and the Kashmiri right of self-determination will surface at the international level, and the legitimacy of the struggle should again be recognized. And the third and most immediate danger is the possibility of a conflict between India and Pakistan being instigated by India for the purposes of diverting attention from its internal situation, as they have done in the past. And here we've seen certain disturbing movements that have currently been taking place along the line of control in Indian policy statements, etc., which is a cause of concern and has been brought to the attention of the Security Council.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. I'll come back to you with more question in relation to the Middle East challenges. But let me go to Ambassador Zamir Akram here. Ambassador Akram, since you have been involved with Pakistan's strategic policy planning also, and you keep a close watch on these issues, give me a sense of, Ambassador Munir Akram just talked about some of the developments. Now, we know that they have cut the fence at 5 different places. Now, this is a protection fence that they had put up themselves. They've cut it. They have deployed a BrahMos regiment in occupied and annexed Kashmir. They had cancelled the Spike, missile order from Israel, but earlier this year in April, they rushed there and they picked up off the shelf about 250 Spike extra-range missiles, which are also, according to our information, deployed in occupied and annexed Kashmir. Now, these are capability-enhancing measures. The intentions are already known. So, is there a sense of urgency here? Are we monitoring this? Have we, discussed this with our partners, the other states?
Yes, we are obviously monitoring it very closely. And we are also in consultations with our friends and allies, the Chinese in particular. So we have already also stated, and the Prime Minister stated that just a few days ago in Geneva, about the dangers of a conflict that can emerge out of the situation that exists in Indian occupied Kashmir, as well as due to the policies that Mr. Modi has been following with regard to Indian Muslims, etc. So we are completely in the know of what is happening across the line of control, across the international border with India. And the Indians, as I said, should not be complacent in the fact that they think that they can surprise us in any way in this situation.
Okay. Ambassador Munir Akram, sir. Clearly, you are aware of all these developments. Our sources say that the United Nations Military Observer Group for India and Pakistan has also been given evidence of these developments. So, as I said, you are at the world body. Have we also approached and apprised the UN Secretary General's office about these developments and the possibility of some kind of false flag operation conducted by India to somehow get the excuse to ingress into Azad Kashmir?
Yes, we are keeping the Secretary General's office, obviously, but more importantly, the presidency of the Security Council and the members of the Security Council, we are keeping them informed on a day-to-day basis on the developments along the line of control and the developments in occupied Kashmir, and moves which have been made that pose a threat to international peace and security. The Chinese have asked formally for a briefing from UNMOGIP on these developments, and we expect that briefing to take place in a few weeks. But in the meantime, obviously, if something untoward happens, we will immediately activate the UN, especially the Security Council.
Okay. Sir, another challenge, since I mentioned the Middle East, and I am largely talking about the Muslim majority states, the Muslim bloc, right now there are so many fissures in this bloc that basically negotiating these choppy waters is not really a very easy task, and I'm sure this is a big challenge for the government also. And since you are at the thin end of the wedge of our diplomacy at the UN, what are the challenges that you face in relation to reaching out to the states that are often at loggerheads with each other for various reasons?
Well, I think the challenges are obvious. There are not only divisions but also rivalries among Muslim states. I think this is a fact of life of international politics and international strategic interests that cannot be denied. We have to work within the system. We have to identify what our interests and objectives are and how they can be achieved. There are times when the OIC and Islamic countries can help us. There are other occasions they cannot help us. We have to find other friends to help us. So we have to work within the entire gamut of the international community. We are finding friends. We have China, which is cooperating with us. There are some other countries in the international community, Islamic and non-Islamic, whose support we can utilize. So we have to work with the reality and see how to promote our interests and who to approach for support on each specific issue.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That was Ambassador Munir Akram, Pakistan's permanent representative at the United Nations, speaking with us from New York. One final question before I wrap up this segment. I mentioned the US-China rivalry. China as the emerging power, US as being the power that has been there for many decades. Do you think that in the coming years, much of what we will see at the global stage in terms of realpolitik and machtpolitik will be determined by this rivalry?
What you're saying, yes, the world is going to be dominated, and it is already being dominated. You see the Indian defense and foreign minister in Washington and the agreements that have emerged in top of what already exists between the US and India, and all this is engineered or generated by the hostility towards China, by the American desire to contain China. So I think the 21st century, or the beginning, this part of the 21st century is already in the beginnings of a Cold War between the United States and China. And we will see this being played out in the years to come.
We'll see this being played out in the years to come. And we have to be prepared for this. Thank you so much. That was Ambassador Zamir Akram speaking with us. We shall take a short break and return to discuss the growing protests in India over the Citizenship Amendment Act. Stay with us. Welcome back to Indus Special. India is rocked by massive protests following the passage by its Houses of Parliament of the controversial Citizenship Amendment Act. 5 states have refused to enact and enforce the law. Civil society activists, political opposition, intellectuals, students, almost everyone seems to be taking to the streets. The BJP government has doubled down, imposing Section 144, suspending internet services, unleashing the police on protesters, and arresting them. Even on Twitter, official police handles have been warning prominent people to not say anything about the controversial law. What's going on? To discuss the situation, we have with us Mr. Rajeev Jaitly, who's the spokesperson for BJP. We also have with us Ravi Srivastav, who's an analyst, and both of them join us from Delhi. Let me begin with Mr. Jaitly. Mr. Jaitly, the famous historian Ramachandra Goa was, pulled aside by the police while he was being interviewed by one of the channels. The entire state of Uttar Pradesh, with a population of 200 million, has been placed under the law banning gatherings of more than 4 people, which is Section 144. In Kolkata, the Chief Minister, Mamata Banerjee, has been holding foot marches, and so on and so forth. So what exactly is the achievement here, Mr. Jaitly?
Achievement in terms of what you're asking about exactly. Because the kind
what
of
exactly is the achievement
watching,
by this Citizenship Amendment Act?
No, look, Citizenship Amendment Act is nothing. It has not. You can't say it is a controversial act. Nobody is able to give us answer. What's wrong in this Citizenship Act? Our Home Minister, Prime Minister has clearly said in the Parliament, in the other public meetings, that no Indian Muslim will be affected by this law. But still, there is appeasement politics by some political people here in India. Those
Mr. Jaitly, the Delhi Chief Minister was on an Indian TV channel where he asked a number of questions. There was a large audience also, and the crux of that was that this is a controversial act. I'm surprised you're saying it's not controversial, because if it's not controversial, why are so many people taking to the streets, and why is everyone up in arms against it?
You know, very surprisingly, I would like to say, these people are raising question on NRC, which we haven't implemented as yet. They are not talking about Citizenship Amendment Act. If you are following Indian channels, just look at all those political people. They are not talking about Indian Citizenship Amendment Act. They are just talking about NRC, which does not exist in India, which we are not talking about. So why they are clubbing two things together?
Okay, why are they clubbing? Okay, Mr. Jaitly, stay with me. Why are they clubbing two things together? Mr. Ravi Srivastav, that's what Mr. Jaitly is saying. He obviously is the spokesperson for the BJP. What is your sense of what he's saying?
He is simply lying. NRC was implemented across the Assam state, and as a result, it was found that there were 13 lakh Hindus and there were 6 lakh Muslims identified there. And those people, the government is trying to shift them into detention camps, which are made over thousands of square meter areas. Now, my point is that what these people are talking, this CAA is a draconian act. It is being opposed across the nation. I am telling you, literally, India is burning. The whole country is under Section 144. Renowned people like historian Professor Ramchandra Guha, Yogendra Yadav, Sandeep Dikshit, so many people have been arrested today since morning. The Delhi itself, where the government seats, is on boil. You are seeing that, violent
Mr. Srivastav, hold you there. Let me go back to Mr. Jaitly here, because he has to also go for a press conference. Mr. Jaitly, Mr. Srivastav does not believe a word you're saying. And he says that entire India is burning. Everyone is opposed to this. He's also said that you did enact NRC in Assam, and also that CAA is very controversial.
NRC was implemented by former Prime Minister of India, Mr. Rajeev Gandhi. Is he aware of that? And now we are talking about CAA. He will not speak about CAA. He will always go to the NRC, which is there only in the Assam. That was the Assam Accord. What is he talking about? That is what I am saying. These people are not in position to give answer on CAA. They are just playing politics. They are playing appeasement politics. These Indian political people are playing appeasement politics. They do not have single answer. Even senior Congress leader in Parliament hasn't raised any question on CAA. He was also talking. He was just whirlpooling everything. So these people are just playing. I mean, these people were on the payroll of some, I don't know which countries and which NGOs.
You are simply lying. It was opposed tooth and nail in the Parliament of India.
I would request you in one more CAA. These people opposed
vehemently in the Parliament of India. Are you aware what your Prime Minister stated? Are you aware what your Prime Minister stated?
I think you should allow these people to come to the Pakistan.
Are really a different kind of attire. Do you know that? The Prime Minister of the country is a burning country now. is burning India
Actually,
by
their
such
shops are
statements.
closed.
You can
People's
find
shops
out
are
the
closed
statement
now.
of Prime Minister. He
They
says
cannot
that
run their shops.
those who are
They
putting
are
the
Lutheran
fire,
people. They are enjoying drinks in the evening. They were getting money
He's
from
saying-
people to enjoy their life.
Amit,
They were
your
always on the
Amit Shah
payroll
is
of other
saying
people. They are
Muslims
still on the
should
payroll
not
of other
fear.
people,
What
other countries.
nonsense! How can you fear 20 crore Muslims of this country?
Hey, you people
What rights you have got to
does
take them
not
fear?
deserve to
Who
stay
are
in
you
India.
to make
I
them
think you
fear?
should take
You are pursuing
citizenship of Pakistan.
divisive
First you should
agenda in
go
the
to
country
Pakistan,
today.
stay there
You
for
are
2 years,
dividing the country
and come back and then
vertically,
come to
Mr.
me.
Jaitly. You should be ashamed of it. Don't divide the
should be
country
ashamed of.
or Hindu and Muslim. You are
Okay,
doing
okay.
the
What is
biggest
going to,
country
entire country has given you reply. Entire country has given you reply.
Gentlemen, may I intervene? May I intervene? Let me just sort of dial it down a little.
All worshipping is allowed here.
Mr.
Nobody
Jaitly,
can stop.
Mr. Jaitly, there is a sense in India that this is about Hindutva, religious exclusion. This is something, this is an impression that needs to be dispelled. But instead of dispelling it, the BJP government is taking actions and measures that only seem to solidify this perception. Now, this is something that you have to seriously talk about and respond to.
You know, we Indians are very much concerned about Indian Muslims. This is what our Home Minister has said, that we are more concerned about our Indian Muslims. We want to give them good education.
Why did you exclude them from
we want them to enjoy the resources of India.
If you are
we don't
concerned, why
want
did you
others to
exclude
come
them?
down to bifurcate their resources.
Why did you exclude
we have
them?
clearly said.
Why did you say
given,
Hindu, Muslim,
what
Hindu,
is he
Sikh,
talking? Who is
Parsi, Sai, everybody
Who is
can come, but Muslims
Who is
can't come.
Who is
Why? This
Who is this person?
Constitution of India does
Where
not
is he calling
divide
from?
anybody on religious
Who is
lines.
this person? He is not analyst.
Religion
He is not analyst. His shop is
Constitution.
closed. His
It
shop
talks
is
about
closed.
the
He was on the
Indians.
payroll
It
of the
doesn't talk about the
agencies
Muslims in
of other countries.
Hindus.
His shop is closed.
Okay.
Your people, allow me, Ejaz, your people, Guru Golwalkar, who was the Sangh founder, he said that Muslims do not
these
deserve
people have come to the road.
citizenship
They
in
do not
India.
have any business. They do not have any factory. They do not have any shop.
That Indian constitution
they were
should be
getting money.
changed.
They were
What
enjoying
kind of
their money.
statements you
They
have
were roaming
made?
in the
Okay,
Lutheran
gentlemen, I also have another.
What is his profession?
I also have
He
another
will not
guest.
tell you his profession.
My profession.
hold
My
on,
profession
hold
is
on.
an my
Hold on, hold
profession
on.
is to oppose CAA and anarchy.
Okay.
That is my principle.
Mr. Rajeev
I cannot see my country divided on
Mr. Rajeev Jaitly hung up. Mr. Rajeev Jaitly has hung up. Mr. Srivastav, stay with me. I also have Mr. Tony Ashai, who joins me from Los Angeles. He's a Kashmiri activist and has organized protests and speaks to different media organizations of Kashmir. Mr. Ashai, thank you so much for joining us. I think you've heard the debate between Mr. Srivastav and Mr. Jaitly. Now, it seems to me that after Kashmir, and Kashmir seems to have been the sort of, test case for the Hindutva exclusionary politics and ideology. So these developments like the NRC, the CAA, seem to be in line with that. Give me your sense of how you're looking at the situation.
Well, basically what you have to understand first is it's not what this government does, it's how they do it. That is what the problem is. They do it in the most undemocratic way. You saw what they did in Kashmir, and now what they're doing is just like, it's like a two-man party. Amit Shah and Narendra Modi come up with these ideas and they just ram it through parliament because they have the majority in both houses of the parliament. Let me explain you this CAA and NRC bill and why this is wrong for India or any other country. In CAA, which they have passed as a law now, basically they're giving amnesty to all the illegal aliens in India except Muslims. And then they're passing the NRC, which they've already passed in Assam, and they're proposing it for the rest of the country. Basically, they want every citizen of India to prove that they are citizens through documents like birth certificates from parents and grandparents. And you know, India is a poor country. There is no way most people can prove. Almost 80% of Indians cannot prove their citizenship. And what's going to happen is then they're going to apply CAA to them. They're going to say, okay, if you're Hindu, Sikh, or Christian, you don't need to prove any document. But because you're Muslim, you need to prove it. And when Muslims cannot give them documents, they're basically going to be left stateless. And this is what the problem is. You got to see both these bills together. And most Muslim and most liberal people in India understand this, and they know this is wrong, and this is based out of hatred for Muslims, and they're opposing it. That's why there's a lot of protests.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for explaining it so clearly, Mr. Ashai. Mr. Srivastav, do you agree with what Mr. Tony Ashai is saying?
I think Tony is quite in line what he has understood about the CAA. The worst part is that explained by the Chief Minister of Delhi today. If you had watched this video interview on a TV channel, he has said that all Indians will have to produce a document.
Correct.
All Indians will have to produce a document under NRC. That may be your birth certificate of your grandfather. You have to produce a document. And those who will be brought into India from Pakistan, Afghanistan and Bangladesh, their documents will be prepared by the government. I mean, this is something ridiculous. They are going to divide the country vertically. This is not accepted by the Indians. They have understood it because Amit Shah, the Home Minister of the country, has said NRC will be implemented across the nation. In Assam itself, when they have implemented it, the expenditure was 1,400 crores. You can well imagine if it is done for a population of 130 crore people, there will be a mammoth expenditure of 10,000 crores only to find out that how many Muslims are there. This is how they are going to do it, and this is how they are going to divide the country. And it is not left to the people alone. The Prime Minister of the country gives a statement in public in an election rally. He says those who are burning the public property can be identified from their attire. This is a straightway indication that who is doing it, the minority community people are doing it. And the other way, our Home Minister says on the floor of the Parliament that Muslims need not fear. I am shocked and surprised that 70 years rule prior to Modi and Shah, nobody used such word कि मुसलमानों को डरने की जरूरत नहीं है. अरे, who are you to make them fearful, make them afraid for this? This is their country. They have lived here after partition at their own choice, and they have done ample of sacrifices for this nation. Why should they fear? And who makes them to fear?
Absolutely.
This is what is
I hear you, Mr. Srivastav. Thank you so much for being with us. Before I wrap up, let me go back to Mr. Ashai here. Mr. Ashai, there seems to be a pushback now because there's a lot of this, especially in relation to Kashmir. Mainstream and mainland India didn't really bother. As a matter of fact, there was a lot of joy about what happened in Kashmir. But now it seems to me that they're slowly realizing that this is the Hindutva agenda. And so we are watching and witnessing a pushback. Do you think that, right now we've seen Delhi doubling down on what it has done, but do you think that they will at some point buckle under this public pressure?
No, I don't think they will, because you have to understand the mentality of people like Modi and Amit Shah. See, their mentality is all based out of hate for Muslims, and they are part of the same group that killed Mahatma Gandhi. So they belong to the same party, RSS. And because they have an opportunity right now, because they're in parliament, majority in parliament, they are going to ram down their bills one after another. And I've heard that the next bill that's coming in parliament is anti-conversion bill. They're going to make it illegal for anybody to convert from one religion to another religion. And I'm sure they will leave a loophole in that.
So how does that square with their Ghar Wapsi agenda?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm sure they will leave a loophole in that The only conversion that will be allowed is into Hinduism from Islam. Everything else will be made illegal, which in itself is wrong. I mean, people don't have a right to express themselves. They don't have a right to practice their religion. But I have really strong faith in Indian people because Indians have experienced democracy and freedom for 72 years. And it's very difficult to take it away from almost 1.5 billion people by just 2 men. And I think in the long run, Modi and Amit Shah will lose, and Indians will take charge of their country.
Okay. Thank you so much. That was Mr. Tony Ashai speaking with us. This is all for tonight from Indus. We shall see you tomorrow at the same time. Meanwhile, for latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Good night and goodbye.